TV. We welcome you back to Newsmax TV in the here and now and America Talks Live, where you can call us and become part of the conversation at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. As a matter of fact, we have a caller from the city that was the fictional home of Rob and Laura Petrie on the Dick Van Dyke Show in real life. From New Rochelle, New York, John joins us today. Hi, John.
How you doing, sir? I'm John Thomas.
Good to have you.
From New Rochelle, New York.
New Rochelle, you betcha. And just for the record, Rob and Laura Petrie were not your neighbors back in the 60s. That was a TV show. But you're on this show. What's on your mind, John?
Yes, I just discovered your station a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I really like it.
Thank
What's
you.
on my mind? There's so many things on my mind.
Well, give me the first one.
I could talk about an hour about this.
Well, just give me something quick you can share with us, John.
Well, first of all, the news and media in New York, right? They have the major paper called the Daily News, one of the Daily News.
Right.
Now, yesterday, the big thing in the other paper, the New York Post, was about the raise in Obama, the premiums.
The Obama premiums. Yeah, what did the Daily News say,
The Daily
John?
News did not say one word about it.
Oh.
When I tell you not one word about it, I'm 78 years old. I'm a retired detective from New York, and I've been around the block. They didn't mention anything that Trump says nasty will be in their paper.
You know, it's very interesting, John, and I guess this is going on, and in a sense, our history shows us that it's somewhat been this case, especially since the colonial days, where one newspaper would have one point of view and another newspaper would have another. And you think back to another pretty muddy election, Jefferson and Adams, I think back in 1802 or 1804, they had pamphleteers, and Adams had his guys and Jefferson had his guys. The big problem, John, as you're pointing out in New York, it's not just the papers, it's the alphabet networks and their cable cousins. In fact, according to a recent study, 91% of the stories appearing on network television news were unfavorable to Donald Trump. So, from that bad news to what Christians might call the good news and the gospel. And of course, Christians have witnessed countless impediments to religious freedom, from the cake baker being forced to bake a cake for a same-sex couple or face losing his or her business, to the court clerk in that Kentucky county arrested for refusing to sign a same-sex marriage license. And now, with just a few weeks remaining, actually with less than 2 weeks remaining until Election Day, evangelical leaders like the Reverend Franklin Graham are telling Christians we all ought to stand up and defend our faith. Here's the Reverend Graham.
God doesn't need compromising Christians. He needs men and women who are willing to stand up and to be faithful to His name.
Franklin Graham spent this year holding rallies at every state capital, praying for the nation, its leaders, and challenging believers to fight against a growing social hostility toward Christians. And there is an organization hard at work, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, that is trying to counter that message. And what this group is up to deserves a closer look, and we get that closer look courtesy of the founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, Matt Staver. His organization dedicated to advancing religious freedoms. Matt, we thank you very much for your time here on Newsmax Prime. Barry Lynn is the guy over at Americans United for Separation of Church and State. He's sending out threatening letters to pastors that their nonprofit status may be at risk if they get political from the pulpit. Here's the letter that Barry Lynn wrote. A segment of it reads as follows. Quote, "You should be aware that some national organizations have been urging religious leaders to engage in problematic activities. For example, you may be asked to distribute voter guides during services or to make them available to your congregants. I urge you to be very wary of such overtures." So, Matt, is this basically a threat, saying to pastors, you get involved here, there goes your tax-exempt status?
Well, it certainly has a hollow threat. It has no basis in the law. And so we are urging pastors and churches just to simply ignore that hollow threat and to exchange the muzzle that Barry Lynn wants to put on them for a megaphone instead. And to use Barry Lynn's letter for the purpose it really needs to be used, and that is the bottom of a bird cage. I mean, that's the best use of a Barry Lynn letter from Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Not one threat has ever been successful by this organization in the history of the United States, frankly, because not one church in the history of America has ever lost its tax-exempt status for lobbying for against legislation or for engaging in political activity, and particularly for the distribution of voter guides. Pastors and churches, they can speak on biblical and moral issues of the day. They can educate people about their responsibility to vote. They can urge them to vote. They can even bus them to the polls, and they can clearly give out objective voter guides. You know what Barry Lynn wants? He wants, like as the previous caller, he wants people to listen to the biased media that either doesn't cover the issues or distorts the issues. He doesn't want people looking at what the candidates really stand for, and that's what these voter guides do. They give what candidate A and candidate B, they stand on these issues this way or that way, and then you can make an informed decision. He doesn't want that. The fact is that that's clearly legal for churches to pass out these voter guides.
Matt, let me turn to a subject. I guess we'd call this more micro-persecution. For example, down in Atlanta, there's a Christian who serves his church as a lay minister on weekends. He got hired by the state of Georgia as a district health director. Soon after he was hired, the state obtained copies of the sermons he delivered at his church, reviewed their content, and then they fired him without explanation. That's got to be religious discrimination, right? Did this guy have a case to take on the state?
Yeah, he certainly does, and there's no question it's religious discrimination to fire someone who's doing their job, and they're not preaching during the work week. They're doing their job as expected, but on Sunday they preach in the sermon, in the pulpit, a particular message that someone disagrees with at the public employer. That is religious discrimination, and that's intolerable. That's what exactly the First Amendment was designed to prohibit, for the government to come in and pick and choose which viewpoints on a subject matter that they ultimately want to support or what they want to suppress. This is clearly not only free speech, but religious discrimination that is impermissible under the First Amendment. He certainly has an action, and I encourage him to take action. Certainly Liberty Counsel will be there to help him and other people that face similar kinds of persecution or discrimination.
Ronald, that's good to know, and let's go back to the phones now at 1-877-Newsmax. That's 1-877-639-7629. Matt, we appreciate your insight. Stand right by and let's listen to what Ronald has to say, calling in from Maricopa, Arizona. Hi, Ronald.
Yes, how you doing?
Fine, sir. What's on your mind?
Well, there's two issues. I'm like your last caller. We'd be here talking forever about what's going on, but I just want to let you know that I'm a Vietnam veteran, served with the 1st Infantry Division in 68 and 69. And I have an uncle who served in Korea, defended this country, and brothers and cousins who did the same. And my big complaint about Mr. Trump is this country's been free for 240 years because of the lives served and given for the freedom of our country. And this man dodged the draft. He's calling us a banana republic.
And so I take it, Ronald, you are a strong Hillary supporter, correct?
I'm a supporter for anybody who stands.
Well, and you have the right to exercise a private ballot, but since you called us to tell us what's wrong with Donald Trump and also to review your service, which we celebrate and thank you for, if you'd like to share, 10 seconds, who are you voting for and why?
Well, that's another.
I only have 10 seconds. Sir, I'm sorry, the clock gets us. Let me say again to you, we thank you for your time. We encourage you to call back. Matt Staver at Liberty Counsel, you are there for people of faith who are being targeted by government. Matt, we thank you very much, and we will have more of your calls coming up. And also we'll get our prime preview tonight with Miranda Kahn. That's coming up following this break as America Talks Live continues.